What if stupidity isn't a lack of intelligence, but something far more dangerous? What if the greatest threat to civilization isn't evil people doing evil things, but ordinary people who have stopped thinking altogether? Picture this. A brilliant scientist begins sharing conspiracy theories. A kind teacher defends oppressive ideologies. A loving parent makes choices that put their own children in harm's way. These aren't monsters. These aren't fools. They're us. In the shadows of Nazi Germany, a man named Dietrich Bonhoeffer watched this unfold. A theologian, a resistor, a prisoner. From his cell, awaiting execution for plotting against Hitler, he wrote a warning, one of the most chilling ever put to paper. Against stupidity, we are defenseless. He wasn't talking about ignorance. He wasn't insulting intelligence. He was identifying a deeper kind of collapse, a moral failure to think, to question, to choose truth when lies feel easier. And the scariest part? It's happening again. Not in secret, not in some far-off place, but here, in the digital glow of our phones, in the comment sections of our feeds, in the quiet, comfortable certainty that we already know enough. This isn't a video about stupid people. It's about how easy it is to become one, and how terrifying the consequences can be. To understand what Bonhoeffer meant, we need to abandon our everyday idea of stupidity. We usually think of it as a lack of intelligence, someone who can't grasp concepts, can't follow logic, can't keep up. But Bonhoeffer saw something darker. He was watching a nation of intellectuals, artists, doctors, and pastors descend into moral madness. He didn't see idiocy, he saw surrender. In 1930s Germany, Bonhoeffer witnessed a terrifying transformation. Educated men who once preached compassion began defending genocide. Brilliant scientists built gas chambers. Ordinary citizens reported neighbors, obeyed orders, and cheered for death. These weren't stupid people. They were people who had stopped thinking for themselves. Bonhoeffer's revelation was both simple and devastating. Stupidity isn't a mental defect. It's a moral and social one. It's not that people can't think, it's that they won't. They trade their judgment for belonging, their ethics for convenience, their minds for the safety of the herd. He wrote, "Against stupidity, we are defenseless. Neither protests nor the use of force accomplish anything here. Reasons fall on deaf ears." It wasn't hyperbole. It was diagnosis. Because the stupid person, Bonhoeffer noted, doesn't see themselves as wrong. In fact, they believe they're right. Absolutely. Righteously. Dangerously. Evil knows it's doing wrong, he wrote, but stupidity believes it's doing good. That's what makes it so terrifying. Stupidity doesn't come with guilt. It comes with conviction. You don't feel shame. You feel purpose. And it spreads like wildfire in group settings. It becomes clear, Bonhoeffer continued, that stupidity is not a psychological problem, but a sociological one. People who are reasonable on their own suddenly lose that ability in a crowd. They abandon nuance for slogans. Replace thinking with obedience. You're no longer debating a person. You're debating the slogans that possess them. It gets worse. Bonhoeffer believed that stupidity serves power. While evil eventually crumbles, because it knows it's wrong and must constantly defend itself, stupidity doesn't need to. It's self-sustaining, resistant to correction, immune to logic. Stupidity is functional, he argued. It serves existing power structures. And that makes it useful, not just in Nazi Germany, but anywhere truth becomes inconvenient, anywhere critical thought becomes dangerous, anywhere it's easier to conform than to confront. We want to believe this is history, that we'd never fall for it, that we'd be the ones who saw clearly, who stood fast. But if Bonhoeffer were alive today, he might not be surprised at all. Because stupidity, this kind of stupidity, isn't gone. It's just evolved. It's been digitized, gamified, and monetized. And we're not fighting propaganda leaflets anymore. We're fighting billion-dollar algorithms designed to exploit every cognitive weakness we have. So ask yourself now, before we go any further, have you ever believed something just because everyone else did? Have you ever repeated a phrase without knowing where it came from? Have you ever felt more righteous than curious? If the answer is yes, welcome. You're not alone. But the real question is, what will you do next? To understand how stupidity can become a force of destruction, we have to go back to the world Bonhoeffer was living in. Germany in the 1930s was one of the most educated societies in the world. Its universities were renowned. Its thinkers were revered. It gave the world Bach, Beethoven, Einstein. And yet, within just a few short years, it collapsed into a regime of hate, mass surveillance, and industrial-scale murder. Bonhoeffer watched in horror as the people around him, people he respected, people he loved, gave themselves over to blind obedience. These weren't ignorant villagers manipulated by propaganda. These were professors quoting Hitler, doctors performing sterilizations, clergy preaching the will of the Führer from the pulpit. What happened? Bonhoeffer's answer was chilling. They stopped thinking, not because they couldn't, but because it was easier not to. The social cost of independent thought had become too high, so they outsourced it. They let the slogans do the thinking for them. From his prison cell in 1943, Bonhoeffer wrote in a letter, "In conversation with him, one virtually feels that one is dealing not at all with him as a person, but with slogans, catchwords, and the like that have taken possession of him." This wasn't theoretical, it was personal. Bonhoeffer had chosen to resist. He joined a conspiracy to assassinate Hitler, and for that, he was arrested and later executed. Just weeks before the war ended, his writing survived, his body did not. But the question remains, why did so many smart, well-meaning people become instruments of a genocidal state? Psychologists tried to find answers. In 1961, Stanley Milgram conducted one of the most disturbing experiments in history. At Yale University, he asked ordinary people to administer what they believed were painful electric shocks to strangers. An authority figure in a white lab coat told them to continue, even when the subject screamed in pain. 65% of participants obeyed. These weren't sadists. They were teachers, accountants, fathers, people who had simply suspended their own moral judgment. Around the same time, Solomon Asch ran a different study. He placed individuals in a room with actors who deliberately gave wrong answers to simple visual questions. The pressure to conform was overwhelming. 75% of participants gave at least one obviously wrong answer, just to fit in. These studies confirmed what Bonhoeffer had seen with his own eyes. The death of critical thinking is not a rare event. It's a predictable response to pressure. It's not that people are stupid. It's that our systems, our social structures, even our biology, can make us act stupidly. And in today's world, that machinery is bigger, faster, and more invisible than ever. Here's where things get uncomfortable. Because the stupidity Bonhoeffer wrote about, this surrender of independent thought, isn't just a relic of the past or a result of peer pressure. It's baked into the way our brains work. Let's start with a term psychologists call cognitive dissonance. coined by Leon Festinger in the 1950s. It describes the intense psychological discomfort we feel when we're confronted with information that contradicts our beliefs. Say you believe you're a good, moral person. Then you realize you just shared misinformation online. Rather than revise your self-image, your brain might double down. You justify it, dismiss the correction, attack the messenger. Your brain isn't wired to seek truth. It's wired to protect your identity. And when you're stressed, overwhelmed, or socially threatened, this defense system kicks into overdrive. You're not evaluating facts. You're seeking relief from anxiety, from isolation, from uncertainty. Bonhoeffer understood this decades before neuroscience could prove it. He wrote, "The fact that the stupid person is often stubborn must not blind us to the fact that he is not independent. It's not that the person is incapable of thought. It's that the capacity has been suspended, often unconsciously. They're not thinking as an individual. They're echoing what makes them feel safe." Now add the modern layer, rational ignorance. When information is overwhelming, when time is short, when survival feels precarious, it actually becomes rational not to think deeply. Why spend hours verifying something when you're working 2 jobs and trying to stay sane? Why wrestle with nuance when a quick headline gives you clarity and community? This is the trap. What's rational for the individual becomes catastrophic for the group. And in that gap, stupidity grows. Functional, contagious, profitable. Because social media doesn't want your critical thinking. It wants your reaction. Platforms make billions when we feel, not when we reflect. Outrage spreads faster than nuance. Emotion wins over evidence. A 2018 MIT study found that false information spreads 6 times faster than the truth. Why? Because lies are often more emotionally satisfying than reality. They're cleaner, more decisive. They give us villains and heroes, certainty over complexity. And once you share that false story, once you've identified with it, it becomes harder to let it go. Because now it's part of you, your tribe, your worldview. We're not dealing with individual failure. We're dealing with structural pressure toward intellectual surrender. Even our brains are complicit. Neuroscience shows that stress impairs our prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for critical thinking and self-regulation. When you're scared, your brain defaults to the amygdala, the fight or flight center. You don't think, you react. This is why, in Bonhoeffer's words, reasons fall on deaf ears. Because under pressure, people stop processing reason. It's not a choice, it's chemistry. Now imagine living in a world of constant pressure, economic insecurity, political chaos, climate anxiety, information overload, and an algorithm whispering in your ear 24/7, telling you what to think, what to fear, what to hate. The results are predictable. Not because we're dumb, but because we're human. Bonhoeffer saw this before most. He didn't just blame individuals. He blamed the systems, the forces, the silence of society that allowed stupidity to thrive. And now we live in a world where those forces are stronger than ever, sharpened by technology, weaponized by marketing, and hiding in plain sight on every screen we own. So here's the question. In a world that profits from your intellectual surrender, can you afford not to think? If Bonhoeffer feared what blind obedience could do in the age of radio and propaganda posters, imagine what he'd say now. When obedience isn't demanded at gunpoint, but nudged into your brain through pixels on a glowing screen. Because we haven't just inherited the old machinery of manipulation, we've upgraded it. Today, stupidity isn't just a sociological accident. It's an engineered feature of our digital lives, designed, refined, and monetized by algorithms that don't care about truth. They care about engagement. And what drives engagement? Emotion, outrage, fear, certainty, not nuance, not complexity, not slow, careful thinking. This is why false information spreads 6 times faster than the truth on platforms like Twitter and Facebook. MIT researchers proved it in 2018. Not because people want to lie, but because lies often feel better. They're cleaner, simpler, easier to repeat. And that emotional punch? That's what the algorithm feeds on. It detects what keeps you scrolling, what spikes your heart rate, what makes you tap share, and it gives you more of it. You think you're choosing your feed, but your feed is choosing you. This is the architecture of chosen ignorance, and it rewards not thought, but reaction. If Bonhoeffer's fear was that people would become puppets, this is the modern string. Platforms that pull on your psychology, your biology, your identity, one micro-interaction at a time. The result? Echo chambers, radicalization, groupthink, and the death of intellectual humility. Once you're locked into a digital tribe, political, cultural, ideological, it becomes dangerous to question it. You don't just risk being wrong, you risk being cast out. And so people double down. They stop asking, they stop listening, they become certain, righteous, suspicious of nuance. Bonhoeffer's warning rings louder than ever. Stupidity is not a lack of intelligence, but a moral failure, a surrender. But now that surrender isn't just social, it's neurological. Every click, every pause, every scroll is data, measured, analyzed, and fed back to you through an algorithm that knows exactly how to bypass your rational mind and tap directly into your emotional core. And with AI, it's only getting worse. Deepfakes can now mimic reality so convincingly, we no longer trust our own eyes. Synthetic voices can say anything. Fabricated news spreads with surgical precision. The battlefield is no longer out there, it's inside your head. This isn't just propaganda. It's precision-targeted psychological warfare. Bonhoeffer feared the moment when humans would stop thinking for themselves. We are living in it. But here's the twist. This isn't just about you being manipulated. It's about you becoming the carrier, passing along slogans, half-truths, and comforting lies to others. The question is no longer, am I being fooled? The question is, am I helping the system fool everyone else? We saw this play out in real time during the COVID-19 pandemic. Doctors, engineers, lawyers, people with advanced degrees and sharp minds suddenly sharing conspiracy theories about vaccines, about tracking chips, about the collapse of the world order. These weren't uneducated people. They were people under pressure, people who were scared, confused, isolated, and desperate for clarity in a world that had stopped making sense. And into that vacuum came certainty. Not the kind built from science and reason, but the kind handed to you on a viral video or a provocative meme. The kind that felt true. The kind that gave you community, identity, and someone to blame. This was Bonhoeffer's nightmare. Not evil masquerading as evil, but stupidity dressed up as virtue. People didn't just spread misinformation because they were ignorant. They did it because they believed they were protecting others, doing good, speaking truth to power. Stupid people think they're doing good. That's what makes them dangerous. And once they shared it, once they owned it, they defended it. Because now it wasn't just a theory, it was a part of who they were. The pandemic didn't just test our healthcare systems, it tested our ability to think. And in far too many cases, we failed. not from lack of intelligence, but from the deep human urge to belong, to be right, to feel safe. This wasn't just a virus of the body, it was a virus of the mind. Let's pause, because this isn't just about algorithms, or Nazis, or pandemics. It's about you and me. We all like to believe we're the exceptions, the thinkers, immune to manipulation, immune to stupidity. But ask yourself, have you ever believed something simply because the people around you did? Because it felt good to belong? Because it was easier than starting from scratch? Have you ever shared a post you didn't verify because it aligned with your worldview or made your side look right? Have you ever dismissed someone, not because they were wrong, but because their argument made you uncomfortable? This is where it begins, not with grand betrayals, but with small surrenders, the decision not to double-check, the shrug when truth feels tiring, the silence when the crowd starts shouting. Bonhoeffer called for what he termed costly grace, the kind of courage that demands something of you, that asks you to think even when it hurts, even when it's lonely, even when it would be so much easier to just go along. Because real thinking isn't comfortable. It's not safe. It means living with tension, admitting you might be wrong, asking again and again, is this true or just familiar? Stupidity thrives in the absence of questioning. So the most radical thing you can do right now is this. Start asking, not to tear things down, but to stay human when everything around you is trying to automate your mind. So what do? How do we resist the gravity of groupthink, the seduction of certainty, the pull of engineered stupidity? We start with intellectual humility, the quiet, steady practice of reminding yourself, I might be wrong. It's not weakness, it's strength. Because when you know you don't know everything, you stay curious, you keep learning, you stay awake. Next, we embrace what psychologists call intellectual friction. Once a week, read or listen to someone who disagrees with you, not to mock them, but to test your own beliefs. Can your ideas withstand pressure, or are they just habits in disguise? Then slow down. Before you post, before you share, before you hit send, take 60 seconds. Verify the source. Ask yourself, am I reacting or am I reasoning? That tiny pause, it's rebellion. It's a crack in the algorithm. It's the start of a revolution. And maybe the most radical act of all? Say, I don't know. In a world that rewards confident ignorance over humble uncertainty, admitting you don't have all the answers is a kind of truth-telling that pierces the noise. But we can't stop at personal practice. We need systems that reward thinking over shouting. We need media literacy, algorithm transparency, and policies that lower the stress that fuels intellectual surrender. Because when people can breathe, they can think. This isn't just about being right. It's about staying free. In Bonhoeffer's time, resisting stupidity cost him his life. Today, it might just mean breaking a habit, asking a question, thinking twice, but don't underestimate the impact. In a world built on cognitive shortcuts, choosing to think clearly is an act of defiance. On April 9, 1945, Dietrich Bonhoeffer was led to the gallows in a Nazi concentration camp. A few weeks later, Germany surrendered. He didn't live to see freedom. His final words to a fellow prisoner were simple, quiet, and devastating. This is the end. For me, the beginning of life. Bonhoeffer wasn't just resisting a regime. He was defending the possibility of thought, the possibility of humanity. Because when we stop thinking for ourselves, when we surrender to the slogans, to the comfort of conformity, to the machinery of emotional manipulation, we stop being fully human. We become, as he wrote, puppets whose strings are pulled by whatever force happens to be strongest at the moment. So the question he left behind still hangs in the air. Who stands fast when the pressure to conform is overwhelming? When certainty is easier than curiosity? When silence feels safer than truth? Who stands fast? The answer isn't found in intelligence. It's found in the choice to think anyway. So here's my challenge to you. Pick one belief you hold with absolute certainty. Then spend 30 minutes researching the strongest arguments against it. Not to torture yourself, not to change sides, but to practice courage, the kind that Bonhoeffer died defending. And if this video made you question anything you thought you knew, good. That's not weakness. That's the beginning of intellectual freedom. Now share this video with someone who's brave enough to think. Because every time you choose curiosity over certainty, evidence over emotion, and careful thought over quick reaction, you're defending the future of human wisdom.